Hello, welcome, good day. My name is Skadi Loist. I'm very happy to be part of the Contours of Film Festival Research and Methodologies conference that Dorota Ostrowska and Tamara Folikov are putting on. I'm very sad to have to pre-record the talk, which seems odd, and it's also really sad to not be directly interacting with my colleagues with whom we've had many conversations about methodologies over the last years at various conferences. Nevertheless, I'm very happy that we now get to have a whole workshop devoted to the topic and at least have some live interaction later. I was invited to talk about my ongoing research project, which is called Film Circulation on the International Film Festival Network and the Impact on Global Film Culture. This is a 3-year funded project which tries to combine existing theorizations of film festivals about the festival circuit, as well as anecdotal evidence from the industry, from industry players with broader empirical approach and with more data-driven evidence-based research rather than specialized case studies, because film festival studies has for many years rather been based in qualitative methods, oftentimes working on case studies, single case studies, either on single films, single production houses, single film festivals. And with our project, I try to actually go beyond the single case study approach and look at a global reach of the festival network and how films travel in that and what kind of impact that has on not only the films but also the circuit and film culture at large. So the project has two main objectives. One is to look at the film level, so the film circulations, how the films actually move on the circuit, and depending on parameters like country, genre, gender of the director, for instance, and what relationship do these patterns have to the festival run or also commercial distribution of the film on the global market. So in a way, we look at film festivals as a so-called alternative distribution system, or you could argue whether the festival circuit has become its own distribution window. And on the other hand, we'd like to look at the festival network itself, like how is it structured, how are the single festivals connected in a circuit, how are sub-circuits connected, how do they generate their own distribution networks, for instance, documentary festivals or queer film festivals or short film festivals that have their own distinct sub-circuits. How does that happen and how does it impact the film circulation? So we try to tackle these questions with the use of data and forms of statistical research while using new methods from cultural data analytics, so with keywords such as big data and digital humanities. This is an approach which led to collaboration with the Kinematics Group. That's an international group working on cultural data analytics. I'm going to talk about that later. And I also want to mention the work of my postdoctoral researcher, Dr. Zhenya Samoilova, who's part of the project, who's a sociologist and a data science specialist who brings important methodological expertise to the project, who can't be here currently because she's on maternal leave. So the project is actually designed in 3 major packages. One is, like I said, looking at the film level. So we try to work out the festival runs. For that, we look at a data set of sample films. We could needs contact data of the filmmakers or distributors. We sent out a survey, and we set up a collaboration with kinematics, and I'm going to talk about each step more in a minute. The second work package is looking at the festival level. So it's about the classification of festivals and the festival network. So how can we divide festivals into tiers, parallel circuits, according to topics or regions? And for that, we started a festival library and want to set up a workshop that was actually supposed to happen earlier this year about how to categorize that. And in a third package, we want to explore digital humanities methods of visualization to see how that can actually help with the analysis in a way that the visualization is not just an illustration of what we find statistically, but actually is part of the actual analysis and helps bring up further questions. So to go into a bit more depth, in step one, we initially started with a sample of films from the year 2013. That is because, like I said, we wanted to work with the kinematics group, which is led by Deb Verhoeven, who at the time was based at the University of Technology in Sydney, UTS, and is now in Edmonton in Canada. They own a data set of cinema showtime data for 2.5 years from 2012 to 15, where they have millions of data points about which films screened in those 2.5 years around the globe, in which cinemas, how many screenings. So a very comprehensive big data set, and we wanted to be able to connect to that. That's why we chose originally the festival season 2013. Also because we wanted to have the festival run be completed by the time we do the research. That's why we started pretty far back. That led working with 6 festivals, 3 from the A-listers, Berlin, as I'm based in Germany, Cannes and TIFF, to have A-level or market-oriented festivals involved. Plus, in order to have a full spectrum of films and festivals, not just the A-listers, but also specialized festivals and all sorts of films, from micro-budget films, short films, experimental films, documentary, thematic films, all involved. We look at the complete programs of those festivals, and we also included ITFA for documentary, Clermont-Ferrand for short films, and Frameline for queer film. That led to a data set of 1,806 observations, which means that involved 1,727 unique films. The difference comes from several films running in several of the festivals at the same time. So this seems like a huge data set with a lot of films. If you track all the data, that's a lot of data to work with and to analyze. However, once we started analyzing and going into more depth, we found out if you want to do statistical modeling with specific subsets, say about documentary films or about queer films from Latin America, or short films by women, the data samples became very small, so that you can't do proper statistical analysis with that, which led us to expand the data set, and we're still working on that. So we want to actually analyze films that ran between 2011 and 17, so that should come out at around 12,000 films in the end. For the films, the first kind of data we pulled were actually from the film catalogs. So, have the basic data on production year, production country, length of film, the director and producer, who's the company, and so on. So this is basically what we would call organic data, because it's data that we find already. That is, however, another major problem with that kind of empirical big level research. There is not that much data to be found easily, not like with, let's say, box office data, that you would pull from boxoffice.com or Box Office Mojo. Festival data are hard to come by because a lot of festivals might have their own festivals, but if you want to have a cross-section across festivals, it's really hard, and there's no database in the world yet that actually provides that data. So that means we need to combine different sources and scrape and find what we can and see how we make up the lack of actual data. So we start with the festival programs. Then we also worked with IMDb data, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth later. Then the Kinematics data set was connected. Later, we also looked at festival databases on submission platforms. So that's organic data, as in that is pre-existing data sets that we combine. And then there's also design data. That means you have a clearer idea of what kind of data you want and how you get it. And because we did not find certain data on IMDb, we then decided to set up a survey. First, let's talk about IMDb a bit more. As you all well know, IMDb is on the one hand, free database that's used globally, that is mostly used commercially. However, it started as a crowdsourced data set that is also integrating further data, which makes it unclear in terms of how the data that are in there are actually generated, which makes it hard for empirical sociological research to deal with the data because they're uneven. Also, as we have seen on the right of the slide, you can see that we matched our films that were in the data set that we found in IMDb, how many variables were actually available. So genre, director, length, and production country were usually there. But once you go into something like budget, distribution company, release dates, box office, there are far less films that actually provide that kind of data. So that means there are incomplete data, incomplete festival runs, which means you have to do a lot of cleanup, evaluating the data set you have. There might be possible selection effects in there that we need to try to address. In order to do that, we tried then to work at how else can we come to the data that we want in order to analyze the run and what kind of effects might have been in there. And we set up our own survey. So we sent out an online survey that we send out primarily to the producers and production companies that we could glean from the festival catalogs. It was a web-based survey. We used Unipark software and asked questions that would allow us to compare the data we have from IMDb, so about festival runs, so which festivals have they sent their film to, what's the festival name, the location, the dates, what kind of awards did they win, what was the actual theatrical release, and what was the budget. But then we also added questions that would go beyond what IMDb could possibly deliver. So we asked about festival submission fees, about festival screening fees, participation in film markets, whether using a festival consultant was done and how helpful that was, marketing costs, whether they actually have the full data set of the festival run, and also about digital distribution. You can, if you're interested, look at the questionnaire. We set it as open access available at Zenodo. Here's the link. And there you can see the complete questionnaire, which we did in order to provide potential comparability for people who also work on film circulation, who might want to ask similar questions, so that those data later can be combined. After looking at these different variables, and looking at the side of the festival run from the perspective of the film, we are now moving towards the level of the festival. One major question, also a question that always comes up when talking about methodologies, is which festivals do we actually talk about? There are estimated around 8,000 or more festivals that are either still active or have been active in the last years. On the right, you see a little diagram from Stephen Follows, who set up a graph showing us how exponentially the festival network has actually grown. More and more festivals have started. And that means those thousands of festivals need to be classified in a way if you want to analyze them meaningfully. So that is one of the main problems, because you can't possibly know all those 8,000 festivals and then divide them manually. Instead, there are some main questions like how, which ones are actually deemed important, which ones are part of this so-called circuit. If you talk to industry people, which ones are the ones that are important for, say, discovery, for marketing, buying and selling, which are important switch points so that the films go further on in the festival run. Because, for instance, programmers attend and find a film and take it on. All those questions are relevant. Also, how would you classify them in terms of tiers? So we started to grow our own festival library to try to tackle the question which festivals are seen as important, and we tried to go with the logic of the industry. If the industry says those films are important, and if enough sources say that, that might be an indication. So we started by collecting festival lists that are put out by film funding agency and film promotion agencies like German Films, the German Film Funder, Telefilm Canada, Unifrance, Unijapan, the Netherlands Film Institute, the Ministry of Education in Spain, the British Council, and so on, Screen Australia, Cinema Chile, Greek Film Center, European Film Promotion, and they provide their own listings of festivals for filmmakers, where they, for instance, sponsored trips to, and so on. So we collected all those. In addition, we put in all the lists of the film festival yearbooks that Dina Jordanova and her team edited over the years, and had their own lists for several regions. So those are the first sources to grow our festival library. The second is obviously from our own sample films, trying to work out where they go in their festival run. That creates its own data set of festivals that is then combined and connected. What is now the next step in that is that we wanted to set up a workshop that still needs to happen once we can work out how we can meet again in person, or whether we try to do that as a virtual conference, which is not as easy if you have actual colleagues from literally around the globe. To find a time slot that is actually working for everybody is not so easy. So what we wanted to do there is go into what kind of theorizations do already exist in terms of hierarchies, like so-called A-lister festivals, B-list, general festivals, specialized festivals, regional audience and community festivals, and so on. How do you use that theorization, and is that possible to convert into metrics so that you can actually sort those 8,000 festivals into a meaningful categorization system without knowing every festival personally? So that's the challenge that we want to work on, like what kind of available data might we be able to find to bring in meaningful categorization, like festival age, festival accreditations, or market affiliations, how many accredited guests there are, buyers, press, the attendance in terms of audience numbers, the number of films, premiere status, etc., etc. So that would be the next step, to then try to categorize the films in order to then be able to speak more about the festival runs, as in, you know, what is the trajectory from a premiere festival to, say, you know, a international run on the national festivals, down to then further audience festivals or community festivals. Then the last step, like I said, is trying to work on visualization methods that help you actually see things that you would not see in a regular statistical Excel spreadsheet, for instance. So one very easy thing that we have here is showing each festival screening already color-coded by the regions where it happened. This will be a film showing. Here you would see the major festivals, the start date, and then the following screenings, and you would see that Europe and North America, blue and yellow, are predominating in that, which is because most of the big festivals are there, but also that might be biased by our sample, obviously. So those kind of things is what we want to look at and work more on. Since I wanted to focus on methodology, I didn't bring much of the existing results yet, but you can look that up on our project website, filmcirculation.net. There are two blog entries, longer blog entries that already explain what we did and what the first findings are, and you can always come back. We have more blogs in the making. Now, the last question from Dorota and Tamara was, where do we go from here in terms of the current pandemic? So the Corona crisis meant a huge disruption of our lives, of our work lives and research habits, as we see right now in this virtual conference. Other conferences have been canceled. The exchange and, you know, the mutual discussion has been halted or transformed into an online world. But the sociality and the undirected serendipitous encounters are actually very hard to emulate in the virtual environment. So that's, in my view, a big loss, and also something that is of big importance to festivals. That's part of what festivals are about as live events, and something that we have always talked about previously in festival studies, but which comes to the fore even more now in current times. Another major issue that has become apparent is the strong interconnection of the industry players. So when the top tier festivals didn't happen, like Cannes this year, the usual logic of premieres, the following festival screenings, distribution deals, theatrical releases, and so on, the complete long tail has been called into question, basically, and many players along the value chain have been turned into turmoil for several months, while now there are, while the new world order, let's put it that way, is settling, there are new models being developed and tested. So there are online festivals, hybrid festivals, with or without geo-blocking, discussing what kind of impact that has if you have a premiere in one spot that is not limited anymore in time and space. What kind of impact does it have for further national distributors or international other film festivals? And what is the usual trajectory that's happening? How is that going on now? Also, this new online world is generating new streams of data. But again, these data need to be actually acquired and analyzed, evaluated, because not just because data exists, it doesn't mean that we know what it tells us and how we can actually deal with it. So there will be much to discuss about that. And also, I would say there is not that much that is actually shockingly new. It's just that certain topics that we've been talking about have now become more urgent or more focused. So I'm very looking forward to having live discussions later this week. Yes, see you there. Bye.